Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for finding us. I hope you are doing well. If you feel like giving us a sub and a thumbs up, that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much. You give us a comment and all that other fun stuff. I do love the comments. I like hopping in the comment section, meeting people, talking about movies and everything like that. Let us hop right into this video. I should also tell you, this is my first time ever recording on my computer. I almost always record my videos on my phone. Previous to recording them on my phone, we used to record on an actual camera that Mike has. Through work. And so I forgot my tripod at home today. I was like, let's just try recording on the computer and see what happens. So do let me know in the comments what you think about this new recording setup. I'm using like an HD webcam and my computer, and it's the boring beige wall of my office. There's an office chair over there and an outlet down there to give you a little bit of visual excitement, but it's not the most exciting setup. But do let me know what you think about this in the comments. What are we here to talk about? Hell to the yes. Royal Warriors. This is a Eureka Entertainment Region B Blu-ray release. This came out January 23rd of 2023, but it took months to get to me because of the problems with the Royal Mail in the UK. I guess the Royal Mail was hacked and stuff was not shipping to the United States, or I guess out of the UK in general, for a very long time. So I just got 3 months worth of Eureka releases. So lots of awesome reviews coming to the channel soon. But to give you an in a nutshell review of this film, obviously you see Michelle Yeoh here. And then here's Hiroyuki Sanada and Michael Wong, the fantastic cast in this film. What I'm going to do is and it came out in 1986, probably also worth mentioning. It's directed by Paul Chung and or David Chung, excuse me. And I don't know why I said Paul. And David and Paul are both in the Bible, though, right? Maybe I'm thinking about the Bible. That's a really bad excuse for why I said the wrong name. I'm going to give you an in a nutshell kind of review of this film, so and Blu-ray. It's going to be 2 sentences so that you can decide, if you don't want to watch this whole video, just to give you an idea of what you're getting here. I hadn't watched this movie in probably about 5 years. This is an incredible movie. It's so good. Now I have to say if you are a fan of 80s Hong Kong thrillers that have gunfights, kind of the gun fu heroic bloodshed type of stuff, combined with badass martial arts fighting. It is a dark film. It is a dark thriller. It is a character-driven thriller. My one sentence synopsis of this film is it's like Ringo Lam if you added a bunch of martial arts and a little bit more sentimentality into the film. And kind of like Wild Search, in the way that that's sentimental, character-driven thriller, if you put a bunch of badass martial arts fighting into it. And this is a top-tier elite release. 2 fantastic commentary tracks, a great essay, an amazing, I'm not joking when I say this is one of the interview with John Shum that is on this Blu-ray is one of the best interviews I have ever seen on a Blu-ray release. It was revelatory for me. I didn't know that much about him. I learned so much about him. He's so smart. He has such a great memory. He's very funny, incredible interview. And there's a great locations featurette too. So if you're on the fence about this, if you like those types of movies, the dark thrillers that I described, fantastic. This is an A+ movie. It is an A+ release. There is no reason not to get it. To give you a synopsis of the film, Michelle Yeoh plays a Hong Kong cop. Hiroyuki Sanada is a Japanese detective, Interpol agent who is in Hong Kong. And Michael Wong is an air marshal. And on an airplane that is traveling from Tokyo to Hong Kong, the 3 of them foil a kind of hijacking escape plot by this criminal as being extradited from Japan to Hong Kong. That criminal and his partner who is helping him escape have 2 other kind of brothers in arms who then they go after. There's this whole media hoopla about it. Oh, these 3 people saved, this whole airplane full of people and they're heroes and stuff. And it's on television. And so the 2 brothers in arms of these 2 guys who are in the hijacking plot, whose plot is foiled, come after them. And it becomes almost like a double revenge thing, where the bad guys come after the good guys to get revenge, and then the good guys go after the bad guys to get revenge on them for trying to get revenge on them. And so it's this pile up of revenge plots. I'm going to show off the physical release here so you can get kind of a look at it. I'm going to give you my impressions of the film after not having watched it, like I said, in about 5 years. And then I'm going to go into detail on the bonus features here. The first thing that you need to see that is mind-blowing, this is Darren Wheeling artwork on the slipcase here. Look at the reversible artwork. This is amazing. I had to reverse the crap out of this bad boy. It is so, I'm trying to find where the focus is on this camera. I'm not used to using it, so I'm not sure where to hold this so that it's totally in focus. But Dude, look at that artwork. And then the back, it's pretty simple there, but I like it. It's effective. Orange and black is always an effective color combination. And then you open it up, you get this on the inside, and you can see the artwork there is the same as on the slipcase, which is what you originally get when you open it. But then, like I said, I reversed it. And there's an essay in here by James Oliver, I believe. Yep, and it is called "On Their Majesties' Service: Reclaiming the Streets in Royal Warriors." Now, what I'm going to do to give you my review of that essay is I'm going to read you like the first paragraph or two, because I think the author here does a really good job of making the case for themselves rather than me just kind of describing the essay to you. I think it's better to just kind of hear the thesis of it to get the feel for what it is. And it's great. Like, I love the way they include these posters from all over the world. The one that's on the back of this one is amazing. The one that's on the back is amazing. And this movie has had so many titles too. This is the floating restaurant, which is in the movie, which I will talk about when I talk about the commentary tracks, because Mike Leader has a really kind of amazing story about this. There you go. And look at that. That's so good. I love it. Okay, so that's the booklet. Like I said, I was going to read you the opening couple paragraphs here. Here is a theory to be considered. The true measure of any cinematic golden age is not the sanctified classics, but rather the supposed second-tier stuff. That is the bread and butter. That is the bread and butter films rather than the superlative outliers that ought to define the golden age, as they are better indications of a high overall standard than more obviously exceptional work. Royal Warriors, directed by David Chung, released in 1986, is an excellent laboratory test for this proposition. It isn't one of the gold star films usually cited as excellent examples of excellence in Hong Kong cinema in the 1980s. It managed only a single nomination at the Hong Kong Film Awards that year for the action staged by Mang Hoi and didn't even win. You would be hard-pressed to argue it is an essential film. Compare and contrast it with the big film of 1986, A Better Tomorrow. Established an entire new aesthetic that would become globally influential. Royal Warriors made nowhere near an impression. That shouldn't, however, be taken as a criticism. And then he goes into kind of talking about the film and how the film represents the industry more broadly and maybe more in a better way than the films that we might consider masterpieces. It's just a really good essay and a really good way to kind of think about and contextualize this era in the history of Hong Kong cinema. So I'm going to look at my notes here because I'm going to give you my impressions of the film. Like I said, now I do want to say this, it looks incredible on this presentation. There are some grainy shots, which is common in these types of movies, especially when you're shooting on the streets. It's mostly establishing shots. They look like they were shot kind of at crepuscular times of day, so like dusk or dawn or whatever, and there's not a lot of natural lighting, and they're a little bit grainy, but the vast majority of the film looks absolutely fantastic. It is so pristine and ridiculous. Like, there are scenes where there's a scene in a parking garage with Michael Wong where I was really kind of like pinching myself. Like, it looked like footage that someone took yesterday from a parking garage. Like, it was just incredible. And the sound, like, it's got the the Cantonese mono, and then there's English dubs, and just I think everything you would want audio wise from a release. Now, to give you my thoughts of this film, this is a superlative, to steal a word from James Oliver, thriller of its time. I would say this is a much better film than Yes, Madam. I don't have any reservations about saying that. Yes, Madam is probably a more classic film because it really kind of is, like, you could argue the first Girls with Guns film. It has Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock, and it has that incredible ending fight that's so kind of like famous and iconic at this point. But I think this is a much better film. The choices that are made in this film by the creative people involved in it, the actors, the director, the people who are in charge of the music, the writers, the cinematographer, like, it's just so good. There were so many right choices made in the making of this film. To give you an idea of the caliber of people involved in the making of this film, the second unit director, and I realize it was early in his career, so we can't think of it as him now. The second unit director was Johnny frickin' Toe. And if you listen to the commentary tracks, both Frank Zhang and Mike Leader and Arna Venema talk about which scenes Johnny Toe shot. And you can really see that Johnny Toe made those scenes, and it's so cool. Think about the level of filmmaking that is taking place on a movie in which Johnny Toe is a second unit director. Again, relatively early in his career, but still, like, to have that level of quality in a second unit director, the top tier director really has to be someone who's really good and knows what they're doing. And the directing here is like, first of all, it's a visually diverse film, which I really appreciate. A lot of, kind of thrillers and action movies aren't necessarily visually that interesting unless you have someone like David Fincher directing it, Ringo Lam, John Woo, like these great visual filmmakers. What's so cool about this movie is it opens in Tokyo, if you're unfamiliar with the film, and Michelle Yeoh is like there as a tourist. And it has this kind of documentary type of feel, and some of it is kind of shot like a Yakuza type of movie. And it's actually Mike Leader and Arna Venema talk in their commentary track about shooting in Japan. They've both shot in Japan before. It's kind of difficult to do that, and so the style, in a way, is probably influenced by the constrictions and the difficulty of shooting in Japan and the way they approach doing that. But it's shot in such a cool way, like a documentary with lots of footage, handheld cameras, like kind of spliced together and stuff like that. So you get a feeling of being on the street. Then you have this incredible scene on an airplane. It is just a fantastic action set piece that is so tense, that is classic, incredible kind of thriller filmmaking with slow builds, silence, bursts of action, really great rhythms within the scene, great martial arts fighting, shooting, escalation of tension and violence and conflict. And it's just like a masterpiece of like contained tension and action. Then you go back to Hong Kong and there's this like press frenzy because of the hijacking and stuff. And you have this like handheld camera, like as though the camera that's shooting the movie is one of the press cameras following them around. And there's all these people, reporters, and like it's such a great uh, creative approach to directing the film and taking it scene by scene and using the visual language and the tools that you need in the scene to most effectively make that scene pop. And the writing is so good, like it's so true to the characters, and it really takes its time building character relationships. One of the things that this film does so well is that it's essentially like a kind of a character-driven drama action film, in the same way that John Woo makes character-driven drama action films. It takes so much care with giving the characters unique personalities, showing their developing relationships, showing the things that make them like one another, not like one another. Like the Hiroyuki Sanada character, this is another just great decision by the writer, the director, whoever came up with this idea. He's got this backstory of he's this like badass, aggressive, kind of like hard to handle detective. And he's doing this Interpol stuff in Hong Kong, and his wife is not happy, and he decides to give it all up and get a normal job back in Japan to not be a cop, so that his wife and his daughter can go home and they can be happy as a family. And so you have this backstory of him being this just like almost like this animal, just like violent out there on the streets, beating criminals, like getting the job done. And then he gives that all up to be this gentle father. And then these criminals come after him, and he has to turn back into that other character. And the way that they give you the backstory and show you how he wants to change, and then how he has to change back into who he was and his reluctance to do that, it gives you so much more to play with as an audience member. It helps you understand the people better, and it helps you invest more in their journeys, so that if anything bad happens to them, it's not a sensationalistic, revenge action film. It's kind of a tragedy. And it plays so well. Michelle Yeoh's clothes in this movie are freaking fantastic and so 80s. I have a note about that. So I just wanted to mention that. You just, like I said, you have really three-dimensional characters here. And what they do really, really well in this film, which is something that John Woo and Ringo Lam, I think, also do really well, especially Ringo Lam, is that they give the motivation and the relationships for the villains too, so that they're not just these one-dimensional evil, I'm the bad guy because I'm the bad guy, I'm going to do bad shit kind of thing, right? John Woo kind of does this too, like in Hard Boiled. You see, there's like the Anthony Wong character is like maniacal and almost psychotic, but the guy who's the boss before him is actually like a pretty compassionate guy who cares about people, and but he's also this criminal, right? In this movie, there's really kind of four criminals, and they have this kind of brotherhood, this bond of brotherhood. And you see in flashbacks why that is, why they care so much about each other, why they're willing to do these horrific things for one another. And in that way, it's kind of like this heroic bloodshed thing of like the bond of brotherhood and morality among the criminals. And it's interesting because this movie came out the same year as A Better Tomorrow, so it really kind of is like a kind of a right on that first wave of heroic bloodshed films. And so in a way, it's kind of like a little bit ahead of its time. But to tell you about, like, I just going to talk about one more thing and then I'll get into the bonus material. One of the things I love about Hong Kong cinema is that it's unpredictable. And one of the ways that great filmmakers like Ringo Lam make it unpredictable is that instead of just having insane batshit stuff happening just for the sake of having it happening, which I also really like because I love movies like Holy Virgin versus Evil Dead and whatever, right? Okay, I'm not knocking those movies. But a great example of this is in Wild Search, the Ringo Lam film, there's a scene where the Chow Yun-fat character has to go and get a piece of information from someone, and he gets the information. In a typical kind of plot-driven thriller, a more American-style film, they would get the information, they would move to the next plot point. While he's getting the information, the person he's talking to is in the process of moving, and he's like, "Oh, do you need help? Like, can my partner and I help you carry some furniture?" And she's like, "That would be great." And then it becomes this scene of character building, and like the plot pivots on character decisions rather than simply moving from one plot point to the next. And that makes it more human and more relatable, but also more unpredictable and interesting. In this film, there is a scene that I'm going to use as an example. I'm going to try not to spoil anything for you here, but the Michael Wong character, you'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen the film. He makes a decision in the moment that, like, the scene is set up in such a way that if you were watching like an American film or a more obvious film, a film in which the characters have less agency, you know exactly where the scene is going. The Michael Wong character makes a decision in the middle of the scene that is not what you expect him to do. It's basically he's going in the opposite direction, but it makes perfect sense within the arc of his character. It's motivated and logical. And that decision he makes completely changes the trajectory of not only that scene, but also the paths of both the protagonist and the antagonist for the rest of the film. So the movie is so purely character driven that the logical, motivated decision of a single character in a moment can completely change the course of the whole thing. I just love that style of filmmaking. I love, love, love it. And I love this freaking movie. It is so good. Okay, so I'm not going to go on and on and on. Oh, there's a chainsaw fight too, by the way. If you don't give a shit about all this nonsense I'm talking about with character driven motivation, blah, 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 there's a fucking chainsaw fight and there's a tank. There's a tank. Okay, so anyway, the Frank commentary is fantastic. He talks about all the different titles that this film has had and how it fits in the Line of Duty series. He talks about the Johnny Toe thing, which is how I knew about that. There's a location in this movie called the California Club, which is famous for Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express when they talk about going to the California bar and restaurant or whatever. And so Frank talks about like that's the same location that's in it was in this building that was called the California Building, and then they tore it down at some point. So like you learn all this amazing history about the locations. And there's one street in this film where there was, I guess, like a stampede on New Year's Eve in 1993, and people died because it got so crowded. And Frank was there before the stampede happened, like on that street on that New Year's Eve. And then he left. And then I guess this crazy event happened, which I had never heard of before. But I mean, so you're learning not only about the films. I mean, you know, Frank does an amazing job giving bios of everyone in the film, everything they've been in, how there's so many amazing cameos in this movie. He talks about all that. Really cool bio of Michael Chan, who's in this film, who plays one of the bad guys, who I didn't know that, like, I knew kind of broad strokes what his bio is, but Frank like dives deep into it, and it's fast. Like he was a kickboxing instructor, and then he was a boxing champion. He was like a correctional facilities officer, and he was hanging out with triads for that. So then he actually became a triad, and like the whole history of his life is so fascinating. Who dubbed whose voice is something that Frank talks about. So Michael Wong's voice, to give you one example, I'm not going to tell you everything because you should go and listen to Frank talk about it. But Michael Wong's voice in this film is dubbed by the guy who usually does Jackie Chan, which is really cool. You know, Frank talks about like he compares this movie to Yes Madam in terms of like how Corey Yun shoots stuff versus how David Chung shoots stuff. And you know, Mang Hoi I think worked on both of those films because Mang Hoi is in Yes Madam, and Corey Yun's style is much more like staccato, quick, a few moves per shot, edit to the next thing. And David Chung's style is much more like 7, 8 moves within a, you know, and Frank like actually counts the 1 move, 2 move, 3, like to give you an idea of how the rhythm and the editing and the shooting works. It's so cool. He talks about D&B and how they were really going for an international audience, which is why you get, you know, people like Hiroyuki Sanada, who is Japanese in this film, and Cynthia Rothrock is in other D&B films, and, you know, Michelle Yeoh, obviously not from Hong Kong. And so I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, so I just like a really great commentary from Frank. And then Mike and Arna, another great commentary from them. I really liked their commentary on this. What's interesting is that they both talk about Johnny Toe's involvement and which scenes he shot or may have shot or whatever. But Frank says that the California bar and restaurant scene is actually shot in the restaurant, and Mike and Arna say it's a set. So there's some interesting information there. Arna lived in Tokyo as a kid, so the Tokyo scene's the beginning. He talks about how like he used to actually go and see stuff like that, and like he knows where this is. And I lived in Tokyo too, so I am familiar with a lot of that stuff too. And they talk about Japanese vending machines, which is always really fun because those are crazy. The difficulty of shooting in Japan, like I said before. So Michael Chan, who I talked about before with Frank's commentary, he lives near Mike Leader. So Mike Leader apparently just like sees him on the street walking his dogs and stuff like that and has talked to him a lot. And he's apparently a really nice guy, even though he has this reputation for being this badass criminal and stuff like that. However, there are also rumors that he's involved in some really shady stuff. I'm not going to say what it is. You should go listen to the commentary track. I don't want to like give you all the info, but they share some really interesting rumors about Michael Jan that were very interesting to learn. And also, there's some great stories about Blackie Ko, who's very famous as a stunt driver and a coordinator of vehicular action in Hong Kong movies. There's an incredible car chase in this movie, incredible, and it's like vehicular mayhem. There are cars like flipping over, and it's bananas, and it's really fantastic. And Blackie Ko is actually driving a bus in that scene, so you see him, and they tell stories about him and like funny little anecdotes and stuff like that. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention about the floating restaurant, which is a location. It apparently disappeared. It's like this giant floating restaurant that you take a boat to. This Mike Lear tells the whole story about it. Supposedly it disappeared. It's very weird and it's very funny. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of their commentary. So I said earlier that there's an interview on here that is one of the best interviews I have ever seen on a Blu-ray release, and I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not lying to you. I'm not just hyped because I just watched it. John Shum is one of my favorite comedic actors for Hong Kong films, and he's in so many great movies. He's got the crazy hair, right? You'll recognize him if you see him. He wears big glasses. He's in the Pom Pom films. I didn't know that he was actually primarily a producer, not an actor, and that he produced more than 50 movies. He doesn't consider himself an actor. He considers himself a producer. He's so smart. He's so funny. He tells these amazing stories about how like he knew John Woo when they were teenagers, and he was like a journalist, and he was making documentary films in the UK and Canada, and he came back to Hong Kong in the late 70s, and he met Choi Hawk, and he met Anne Hui, and he like kind of got more interested in doing those types of films rather than documentaries. And then he started D&B. Like he was one of the founders of D&B, and he talks about how that happened. And he talks about working with like how he met Sammo Hung and what his working relationship with Choi Hawk is. He tells really interesting stories about the making of I Love Maria. Like it was inspired by Metropolis, the Fritz Lang movie. And the Tony Leung character originally wasn't in it, but then Choi Hawk was like, you and me are going to be in this movie, but we're kind of old. We need like youth culture people in this movie. So they wrote like the Tony Leung part. He does talk a bit about Royal Warriors. He talks about how he first discovered Michelle Yeoh. Actually, he was in Singapore and he saw her on TV. And then how he went to Japan to sign Hiroyuki Sanada to be in the film. And it's all in English too. His English is immaculate. And he like invests in movie theaters in China. He's like this like business mogul, but he's also like this hilarious comedian who's also this like mega producer. It's just like this revelatory interview with all this incredible information. Like I would pay the cost of this whole release just to watch that interview. Plus you get this amazing movie and this amazing presentation, all the bells and whistles, the commentary tracks. There's one more thing I want to talk about. It's a 33-minute interview. I didn't say that. It's the location video, which is 10 minutes long. Mike and Arna, and they go around. It's both Yes Madam and Royal Warriors, and they show all the locations. They show like a subway map so you know where in Hong Kong it is. They recreate shots from the film. It's very funny and amiable and silly. And they talk about like one thing that's really interesting actually is that one of the key opening scenes in Yes Madam is used in like a really pivotal, essential sequence in Royal Warriors. And if you're not looking for it, you can't really tell it's the same place because one is shot like from one angle way up high and the other one's like more on the ground, and they show like stills from each film, and like there's a part where they like circle in red, like you can see this bit, which is also this bit in this movie, and like it's just so cool how granular it gets about where all this stuff was shot and how they shot it and what kind of angles they were using. It's just really, really, I'm such a location junkie. I just love those types of features. So there is nothing for me personally not to recommend about this release. This is like, and this came out in January. What a great way to start a year with a release that's like top tier. Like there's no way this won't be on my best releases of the year. I mean, unless someone announces they're putting out every John Woo movie, in which case, obviously that would dominate those, but there's no way this won't make that list. This is an incredible 5-star release of a fantastic film that was so great for me. I really hadn't seen this movie in probably 5 or 6 years, and I think I had only seen it 1 or 2 times. I didn't really remember it at all because I've seen so many Hong Kong films since then. They've all got kind of jumbled in my mind. I really just remembered like the nightclub. There's a very famous nightclub action scene and the airplane action scene, which are both phenomenal. But so going by it, that's all I have to say about that. My name is Will. It is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I'm really excited to review the rest of the In the Line of Duty films. I will be reviewing 3 and 4 really soon. I do have those already, and so those reviews are coming up. Get ready for that. Let me know in the comments what you think about this movie, what other stuff you want me to be reviewing, and we'll see you next time.